Hello and welcome to Philharmonious, the podcast of the Czech Philharmonic. My name is Ian Mikyska, and my guest today is Norwegian pianist Leif Ove Andsnes, who came to Prague to perform the solo part in Edvard Grieg's piano concerto. We talked about whether this piece is truly as Norwegian as is often claimed, what he learned from his Czech piano teacher in Bergen, and the experience of transitioning from a small rural community in western Norway to an international musical career. I hope you enjoy our talk. Leif Ove, there is a really beautiful story that I heard you tell once about how serious you were about music even as a young child. If I understand, when you played for your family and some of the children would start maybe dancing, you got very angry and you would stop. Is that right?
That's true. If I was asked to play for, extended family in some parties, I wanted them to be quiet. And then if some children started playing around or people started talking, I got very frustrated. And I remember once that I left. I was in anger. So I guess I've had from the start that one has to listen to the music. It means something. Yeah.
But did you have this with all music from when you were very young, or was it specifically, say, this classical piano repertoire?
No, I think music in general was serious for me. I am brought up in a home with lots of different music. Actually, my father has been a band conductor. I was myself playing in the brass band. I played the euphonium when I was a child as well. So I played the piano. Obviously, this was my most serious business, but also it's very lonely for a child to play the piano. And I was playing euphonium in the band. It was more social. And was also very serious about that. We were part of competitions and things like that. So I continued playing that till I was 16 or so.
So there wasn't any light music in your childhood, any entertainment?
Yes, like all youngsters, I had a period when I was also listening to pop and rock and so on. But very often I would also then sit down and to play the songs on the piano and find things myself about it. So. But I do remember that music was something that communicated deeply to me from very early on. And I especially think about some episodes when I'm about 9-10 years old, when I'm sitting alone, sight reading some music for the first time, really discovering that this is my language. Some easier pieces by Grieg and Chopin and that I find the harmonies. There's no teacher, there is no parent around me. I'm doing it myself. And I think this discovery as a child that I found my own language, this is ultimately what makes me play today. It's so important to find that fire in yourself. At some point, it doesn't need to be when you're 9, but maybe when you're 13 or 15, but it has to really come from yourself. Otherwise, I think at some point it's not so interesting anymore.
And it sounds like really it was a journey of discovery, but also understanding with your fingers in your hands how the music works, right? It wasn't so much about some sweeping emotional impact that really, gave you a tremendous experience at the concert hall, but it was this process of learning, actually.
Well, both. I mean, the emotion comes together with also learning things and understanding. But yes, also emotional. I mean, I remember pieces that I listened to in my childhood that meant so much. And this kind of first love, when you hear some great pieces of music, it never fades. For me, Mozart G minor symphony number 40 was really a piece that I loved when I was really little. And to this day in my life, that is the piece I think of if I think about classical music. What is classical music? It's that piece. I immediately, just thinking about it, I get goosebumps. And I think it's because it has always been there. I cannot imagine that a world without this. So it's deeply planted in me. So yes.
And it's crucial, I think, what you said is that they're not separate, right? The kind of technical or intellectual aspect of it and the emotional, you discover through the intellect what makes it work emotionally, right?
That's what is so fantastic with music, that it combines everything. It can start with the emotion, or it can start with the technical side, and then it combines everything. And that's why it's so fulfilling in so many ways.
There's this, let's say, traditional romantic aesthetic where the emotions come from the composer and the composer really puts them in the music. Is this, I don't want to say believe, but do you appreciate this perspective, or do you have a different view as a performer?
Yes, obviously emotion comes from if it's an emotional piece, if it's some music that means something emotionally, it has to have been felt at some point from the composer. There has to be a will and a feeling, a passion. But if you mean that, it means that we as interpreters can be more objective and just deliver the message. I don't believe in that, and especially not anymore. I believe more and more that you have to be very subjective as a performer. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't read what is in the score, because I'm trying to really discover the emotional impact of the music through all the markings in the score from the composer. But I have to put my whole heart into it. I have to live with Mr. Brahms or Mr. Beethoven or Mr. Grieg or whoever it is, and to follow everything through the score and through what comes out in the sound.
So it's really about channeling that, being like a good conduit for these emotions.
I don't believe in this kind of distance or let's say an objective approach. Only by being really subjective in belief and in passion and in attitude can one achieve this feeling that the music speaks by itself, which is then some people call that a kind of objective feeling, that you feel, oh, it was like Beethoven spoke to us. The interpreter was not so important. But you cannot achieve that if you don't put your whole heart into it, I think.
But also it's difficult to achieve that if your ego as the performer, your vision of your input in this is huge. You have to put that back to a certain extent, right?
Ego is not good, but courage is good. And so if some people say, oh, don't put your ego in there, and people withdraw and become very anonymous, and then there is nothing. You have to have courage. You have to have belief and goal and impatience and everything. But ego that comes from, I want to show what I can do with this music, that's not. Then there's a false feeling, most of the time. But one has to have the feeling that I'm in this moment, I'm the soldier for the music. I have some real courage.
There's a quote of yours that I wrote down that I really like, which was that sometimes people talk about art in general or music as an escape, but that for you it's kind of the opposite. It's art allows you to get closer to life. Is that still true?
Yeah. I mean, I live with music every day, so if it would be an escape, it would be escaping life all the time, which I don't think it is. It is life, for many of us who work so closely with music and so in it.
And I love this idea of getting closer to life somehow. Does that happen? Is it like a kind of mountain that you have the practicing and then the rehearsals, and the moment where you really come the closest is when you perform? Or is it more random? Can it sometimes be when you're practicing by yourself or listening to music or rehearsing?
It can also be done, yeah. But of course the momentum on stage when I'm performing in front of an audience and maybe with other musicians, the kind of community feeling, the bond between us, the importance of 1,000, 2,000 people listening to the same moment, the same silence, the same will in the music is so strong. And of course, adrenaline goes up. It's also a physical thing. And I struggled with this when I was young and started playing concerts. I struggled with the fact that this felt so important, and then the rest of the life felt so trivial. How do you keep that feeling of intensity in your life? Fortunately, that with the years has disappeared, that discrepancy between the two. Of course, sometimes it can still be empty when you get off stage.
Is it because the on stage is less intense, or because everything else is more intense?
I don't know. I think it's also the experience of handling it better, but also maybe finding life in general more touching. That's I don't know. Life is rich and emotional and painful, and in so many ways. So it's not only on stage, and maybe also it helps that I have a family. I have 3 children, and so there are many things that give me deep emotions, but it's also maybe getting older and getting more touched and care more about the small things in life.
But you're not tired of the stage, clearly.
No, not at all. And the intensity is absolutely as much as before on stage. And in a way, I feel that the freedom on stage and the happiness on stage is bigger than before. Earlier, maybe I had more a feeling that I had to control everything on stage to be as good as possible, and I feel now I can sometimes let go more, be more spontaneous and free.
You started your career as a performer quite early on, or relatively early on. Do you feel like you were prepared for that at that point? I mean, not the music necessarily, but everything else, the exactly performing and touring and traveling and so on.
The short answer is no. I was not prepared. I'm actually from a home and small community in Norway, on an island on the west part of Norway. My parents are music teachers, but not professional musicians. And around me, there were no professional musicians till I was 14. Then I got my first lessons with a professional pianist. So nobody prepared me for life as a musician, what it would be like. I just felt this thing was serious in my life. Music was serious. And I thought, when I was 12, I thought, okay, maybe I can become a musician. But what does it mean? What is that life? And suddenly I was 17, 18 years old, and I was making my debut and playing with orchestras, and I started having even an international career. And everything was new. People, language, places, pianos, halls, audiences, organizers, everything, foods. And I had a few tough years, Also, I did not have a lot of repertoire. I thought, how can I live as a pianist with such a limited repertoire? I felt like slow learning things. It took me time to be a bit more risky and put more suggestions of repertoire out there. So by the time I was 25 or so, I started feeling a bit more relaxed about it and free about it.
So it was something you had to sort of catch up with a little bit. I imagine also the whole social aspect of it, right? Absolutely. It changes your life when you go to a conservatory when you're 14 or 15 and everything becomes about music. Do you feel like you've caught up at this point? Yes,
I have. And the most problematic was that I felt like 2 different persons, because I was a student. I was going to the Bergen Conservatory with my bag on my back, and then the next day I would be sent somewhere as a pianist, and I had to really deliver professionally. And these 2 persons, it took some years before they became one, and where I felt, I can be myself in everything, So it, but maybe that was not bad. Sometimes, this resistance can be good.
You mentioned the Bergen Conservatory where you studied, and an interesting connection here is your teacher, who I think was quite important for you, was Jiří Hlinka, who's a Czech pianist who moved to Norway in the 70s.
Sure.
I was really, once in one interview you mentioned that his Slavic temperament was very important for you. It seems like quite a contrast, the sort of general Norwegian approach, and then this kind of fiery, where music is about life and death. So that was quite an important moment for you.
Well, I really needed that. I met him when I was 15, and I was quite a shy boy from western part of Norway, from a province. I come to him, and he was so fiery. He had so much to give. He was in his 40s, he couldn't play anymore because of an injury in his hand. So he had so much to give to his students, and when he saw me, it was talent, and he lived so many things through me, and gave me so much, and opened up a feeling that one could tell stories in the music, these huge contrasts. And I was so inspired. That was the most important thing with these lessons with him, that every time I came out from a lesson, I immediately wanted to go to the practice room to work further on what I had learned. And then he had a culture from here with him. He was very inspired by the East, by Russian piano school, and of course his teachers here, Palenicek, František Rauch. He played also for Svatoslav Richter, who came and visited, and Gilels was here. But also influences from the German piano school, and so it was like the world came a little bit to Norway, which especially at that point was quite isolated. So it was very important for our environment there to have figures like him coming and showing us.
And it wasn't just musical support. I imagine that he also could help you with the career aspect of it and the travel and so on. And sometimes he would also travel with you to concerts? He
traveled sometimes in the beginning with me. And of course he knew this life from he was young, because he had been doing it. And that was helpful, but of course these things one has to find out by oneself. Everything, it's very personal.
You're playing with the Czech Philharmonic, you're playing the Grieg piano concerto. And did you study that with him?
Yes.
Also? Because it seems, I was thinking about this a lot, it doesn't really seem like a typically Norwegian piece. It's this big romantic expression. Like, it's not like Sibelius and Finland, where the connection is much more clear to me. So it seems like actually he would have been a big help even for this Norwegian repertoire.
Oh, yes. But it's interesting you say that, because so many people say, oh, it's such an expression of Norwegian nature and all these kind of things. And I think you're right. It isn't. It's very much a piece, first and foremost, built on European tradition and his time in Leipzig, because he was studying in Leipzig from he was 15 years old. I'm talking about Grieg, and you heard, for instance, Clara Schumann play his husband's piano concerto when he was, I think, 16. It made a really lasting impression on him. And the whole first movement of the Grieg concerto is totally built on the Schumann concerto, but with a completely different expression. It's much more extrovert in a way, and less urban, less sophisticated, but more, sometimes pianistically, it's more like Liszt. Liszt was also a mentor to Grieg. So it's really like a piece so connected with the European culture, to German culture, and to other aspects. And then, yes, a little bit of some folk elements from the Norwegian music that he puts in there, some dances and some harmonies that are, like his signature harmonies.
But it feels a bit like Dvořák New World Symphony, right? That's
yes.
Czech music. It's not American music.
Absolutely.
And to me, Grieg also feels more German in a way.
Yeah.
And you've recorded that concerto with the Bergen Philharmonic, and you've performed it with numerous orchestras. What is the difference there? Is it because does it actually work better with German orchestras, North German, or?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, you can do wonderful performances of that piece with lots of orchestras and conductors if they really want to go into it. And the wonderful thing about the concerto is that it has an enormous freshness in the contrast of the piece. It has these explosive aspects. It's a 25-year-old man who really wants to show the world what he can do. There's such a youthful exuberance. And then it has very touching simplicity and beauty. And we know that Grieg had problems often writing in the big forms. He never succeeded writing a real symphony or an opera. But somehow, this period early in life, he had a kind of flow. And this is the peak. You feel every transition in this piece is so natural and surprising sometimes at the same time. So I don't know. As a Norwegian, I played it so much in the beginning of my career that I had to, when I was 25, I said to my manager, I cannot play this anymore. We must get to other things. But now, later, I just so much enjoy playing it again. It always gives a lot, and especially in front of an audience. But it's such a concert piece.
And to go back to Jiří Hlinka, you've also performed and recorded music by Dvořák, Janáček, Smetana. Do you feel you got a special kind of perspective on Czech music from him as well?
Absolutely. And he would play Czech music for us. And as a matter of fact, I think the very first time I met him, I see him sit at the piano and play a little bit when I come into the room, and he played some piece and he said hello and do you know what I was playing? And no, I don't know the music, and it's Janáček from On an Overgrown Path. And I didn't even know the name Janáček. I was 15 years old. I didn't know so much music. And for me, it was a revelation. I fell completely in love with this music. And so Janáček was one of my first loves when I worked with him. He would also emphasize Smetana piano music, also because it's fantastic for technique and it's so pianistic. A little bit less Dvořák, which doesn't maybe have this pianistic quality, but it's also wonderful music. And I remember we listened to the piano concerto, for instance, and he got very emotional because it reminded him of Prague and later in life, I played all the Dvořák poetic tone pictures, which became like my cycle of Dvořák, which I believe is so much in. It's such a great cycle of pieces, 1 hour long. So Czech music means a lot to me.
And you're still now you're involved a little bit with the Jiří Hlinka Piano Academy in Bergen. How much are you still in touch with your teacher?
Yes, I see him sometimes in these concerts when we do concerts with the academy. I teach there 2 or 3 times a year. It's a wonderful masterclass academy that he started in 2008. And now, basically, we are 3 ex-students that are leading the academy, and we have applications from all over the world. People stay for 6-7 days and get lessons. We have also guest professors coming from outside of Norway, and it's basically the only regular teaching that I do, and I like it very much.
I want to ask also about Geir Tveit, a 20th century Norwegian composer who you've performed quite a lot. I want to first ask about his kind of position in Norwegian musical life, because from the outside, he's quite obscure, but it doesn't seem, even looking at recordings and releases and so on, that he's like a major national composer in Norway.
Well, it's a very special also sad case, because so much of his music is disappeared in a fire in 1970. He died in 81, and he lived on a farm in western Norway in the Hardanger Fjord, and unfortunately had most of his manuscripts at the farm, and everything went up in smoke. He lost everything, including, and of course worst of all, maybe about 70% of his music. So, what a tragedy. Fortunately, some of his best pieces, wonderful music, had already been published. Among them, his Sonata number 29, which I've been playing the last couple of years, which I didn't study until 3 years ago, and I'm so happy that I studied it because it's absolutely unique, huge piano sonata, more than half an hour long, and big virtuosic. It can remind one of French piano music. He studied in Paris. He knew a lot of French composers and so on, but also something very big storytelling, like Prokofiev rhythmically, and it has something very dramatic about it, and it makes an impact on the audiences. I've played it now, I think, about 40 recitals, and everywhere I play it, people really get fascinated by it. And I'm going to record it this summer. So, which I'm happy about. It's an important piece. And in my country, I would say we have no other piece like that. I mean, we have some pieces by Grieg, but not on that scale.
Final kind of area, I think it's clear you have an interest in other forms of art and visual art, and you've also participated in or created various multimedia collaborations. I think for me that was most striking was Pictures Reframed, which is pictures at an exhibition by Mussorgsky with a kind of video component and a live action component. What motivates you to take on projects like this, to kind of go outside of the standard, piano repertoire, recitals and concerts?
Well, it's a little bit to see what happens and if it can also communicate to other audiences, which was clear that project did. This was back in 2009. I was working together with a South African visual artist, Robin Rode, who made 15 films for the different movements of pictures at an exhibition by Mussorgsky, which I was then playing. And there was a video screen showing this, and there was a whole stage set, actually. And the whole evening, which also included pieces by Thomas Larcher, new pieces, and some Schumann and so on, it became a kind of theater play. And I think for some traditional classical audience, it was a bit hard to handle, to look so much at the same time as listening to this great music. For others, and a lot of young people, I had really a lot of positive reaction. And especially from this kind of arts audience that goes to contemporary art exhibitions and so on. So it was interesting, sociological experiment as well, to see what happened with the audiences. And I think we have to try, to see in which way can our music communicate, but not only something as radical as that, but I think. Also, I have been running chamber music festivals in Norway. I still do, in a place called Rosendal. And I think speaking with the audience, having discussions, showing the passions about our music, not only through the traditional way of playing, but before concerts, in panel discussions, in all these kind of things that helps, and it's necessary in our time.
So it's really the motivation is to make it more open, more accessible, to invite more people in outside of the traditional audience.
That's one motivation. Another motivation, of course, in combining different arts can be to see what happens, if it enhances certain aspects of the music, or maybe sometimes it takes away. You never know. I guess it's a little bit like when you're involved in an opera production, which is so often having so many compromises. But when an opera production works, my God, then it's like you get elevated incredibly. I actually just saw a production of Madame Butterfly in Baden-Baden with the Berlin Philharmonic, and I thought it's incredible what it can mean when everything works. Yeah. So I guess also as a pianist, it has been interesting to take part in some of these kind of projects to see what happens with different arts.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.